Good morning, fellas. Happy Monday to you. Hope you're doing well and hope you had a great weekend. Recording this for those who were not able to join us this past Saturday, just to give you a snapshot of what it is that we talked about as we looked at 2 Samuel chapter 6, which gives us a detailed account of David's attempts and eventual success in bringing the Ark of the Lord into Jerusalem. At this point in chapter 5, all of Israel, all of the tribes came together and anointed David. They rallied behind him and anointed him to be the king of their nation. And here it is, David's really his first act as king, aside from pursuing Philistines, was to go and to retrieve the Ark of the Covenant from Kiriath Jearim, where it had laid for years, kind of forgotten about and discarded by Saul. David has a desire to make sure that the Lord and the Lord's Ark and the Lord's covenantal promises to his people are front and center in terms of their identity as a nation of a people of faith. So they head out and they collect the Ark, they put it on a cart and they bring it forward. And if you heard the sermon a few months ago, most of this will feel very familiar to you. But we had a lot of time and a lot of conversation around Uzzah, who reached out when the cart tipped. He reached out to try and protect the Ark of the Covenant from falling to the ground, and there he was killed instantly on the spot. David, recoiling in both fear and horror, realizes that God's holiness is nothing to be trifled with, and he says, "How could the Ark of the Lord come to live with me?" And in his fear, he chooses to put some distance between himself and the Lord. He drops the ark at the house of Obed-Edom, the Gittite, as he heads into Jerusalem and spends some 3 months kind of lamenting the loss of Uzzah and working through the trauma of his near-death experience and trying to get to a clear understanding about why God would strike down one of his people in what seems like such a haphazard and random way. I think that for some of you who are able to read the accompanying chapter in First Chronicles, chapter 12, you got to get a little bit of a look behind the curtain and a better sense that what David gleaned in his conversations with the priests and the Levites and those who were familiar with the Lord's law, that there was a particular way that God had laid out for his ark to be handled. And that, in fact, the way in which David had set about moving the ark to Jerusalem was disobedient, and it was irreverent. It was not demonstrating a willingness to obey God in the details of his rules, the details of how he had laid out an appropriate way, posture, and means of approaching him. And so, armed with this, and spurred on by the accounts that Obed-Edom's family were enjoying great blessings because of the ark, David was motivated to once again kind of make a new attempt. And so he gathered Levites this time. And with the Levites, they carried the ark on the poles as was prescribed. And David sacrificed a sacrifice of atonement, a sin offering, before he danced zealously before the Lord on the way into Jerusalem, about a 3.5-hour walk from Kiriath Jearim into Jerusalem. And throughout that time, David was dancing in a linen ephod. He was dancing with abandonment. He was dancing in a way that demonstrated, as he would later recount to Michal, his wife, that he did not care about whether he was being humiliated. He did not care about his dignity. He did not care about what the people were thinking about him. And at least at our table, the line was connected that David's awareness of God's grace and the incredible way that God had protected David from the very real consequence of his disobedience and his sinful omission of following the law welled up in David a very sincere sense of gratitude, a very genuine sense of worship and praise that the God that he was to be championing as the king of Israel was a God who had literally just saved his life, and not because his life was deserved to be saved, but just because God was being kind and gracious to him. And so he was giving it all. He was laying it out all there in worship in front of the entire nation. And he was modeling for Israel what unrestrained worship looks like. And then we had a little bit of time to talk about Michal and her heart, her posture of dismissiveness towards David, her posture of condescension and judgment. And we remembered that the last time we saw Michal in the scriptures, in David's narrative, she was hiding an idol in their marriage bed and pretending that this idol was in fact her husband, so that David could escape and get away from Saul's men who were after him. But it seems clear that Michal, in having idols in her home, and two, in having no esteem or no awareness of why David would be acting in such a manner, that it seems like her heart is certainly not one that has been captivated by the love of the Lord. It seems like Michal's heart is pretty hard-hearted towards Yahweh, and that her preference and her posture is one of looking for a personal sense of dignity and respect, in ways that make it clear that certainly she does not have an appreciation for the incredible power of God's grace in a way that David does at this time. So a lot more that we could have talked about. It was a great conversation. Really grateful for those that were there. I hope you guys have a great week. We got Palm Sunday coming up this week. And this Saturday, we'll be looking at chapter 7, which is the Davidic covenant, probably one of the most pivotal passages in the Old Testament in terms of connecting the large narrative scope of God's salvation plan, from his covenant promises to Abraham, to the covenant promise that he gives here to David, to his covenant promises that are fulfilled in Jesus. 2 Samuel 7, one of the most incredible passages that we're going to read in these two books. So if you have the opportunity, I do encourage you to listen to some of the sermons, look at some of the resources. There's a ton to dive into. Can't overstate the significance of this chapter. I hope you have a wonderful week. Please reach out if I can serve you in any way. I'll be praying for you, and look forward to seeing you soon. God bless.